what I would like to do now, while most of us are here, all of us are here, Jito is here, to spend at least the next half hour, 40 minutes, to talk about some of the key concepts. I know after I've finished, Sanjay is going to pick it up from where I left off. But I thought it might be a good idea, first thing in the morning, to go through some of the key principles and key concepts that we'll be talking about in the next 2 days. As you see, the first slide has got a bunch of them. When you came to this workshop, when you decided to come to this workshop, the one thing that stuck in your mind, I'm sure, was open educational resources, right? Okay, that's very clear. Well, at least the concept is clear. The meaning of it might not be that clear, as Jita was saying. But there's a whole bunch of other things related to open educational resources and why we are talking and why should be talking about open educational resources. And these are the other concepts. You will hear or you will see in literature things like open educational practice. Now, is it the same thing as open educational resources? Open learning, open access, open source, open scholarship. They are different concepts. I'm not assuming, I'm certainly not assuming and certainly not undermining the fact that many of you will be aware of these things. But just to have a conversation amongst us here, it would be good for us to put this out there and see if our perceptions and conceptions of these concepts are similar. Are we on the same ballpark or not? And I think that's the goal that I'm trying to achieve right now. You have listened to this video, and if you went to this site called Education 2020, you will see a couple of links there, but I'm not going to go through that. You will see things like the tipping point. Just read that. In an age of economic volatility and increased competition, most organizations, not just open universities like USP, across the world, are using the concepts of open to people, places, and methods and ideas as a mainstream marketing strategy to attract a highly mobile student population. Why do you think universities like Stanford, MIT, Harvard, in universities in the UK, which were Ivy League campus-based organizations, are thinking along these lines? They're not silly people, right? There must be something in it. I think we need to ask that question. Students at many of these places of learning have access to not only a wide variety of learning resources, but resources which they are able to adopt easily at no direct cost to them, and also modify as and when necessary to meet their goals. What I'm trying to do is to provide some sort of a context for us to have a meaningful conversation about open educational resources. What you heard in the video, you might say, yeah, some of it didn't happen, some of it happened. Like, for example, there was a statement there that Google has bought Khan Academy in 2013. Well, that didn't happen, isn't it? Google hasn't bought Khan Academy, but someday it might. Things like that might be happening. Google is buying a lot of stuff. Now, if that were to happen, what would happen? And in our lifetimes, we've seen YouTube, Vimeo, and other things, grow exponentially where content is made available freely and openly. And good content, not just willy-nilly useless content. So I think that's the context that we are in. That's the future of education, with the kinds of facility that Jito is talking about in terms of bandwidth. We complain about bandwidth on USP campus right now, but that's not the way the world is going to be, right? And in our lifetimes, things are going to change, not when we're gone. And hosting capacities that Jito is talking about. So things are going to change very quickly in our lifetimes. And I think, as I was explaining to somebody just a while ago, that if we have roads like the Autobahns in Germany that we can drive at 300 kilometers an hour, and if you don't have the software or the cars to drive or go at 200 kilometers an hour, then what's the point? You haven't taken advantage of that opportunity. So we as educators need to come together and say, it's not just about, as Jutta was saying, not about picking resources for your course. It's how is that particular type of course and where it's available is going to change the way learning and teaching is going to take place. And if you're not thinking like that, then you're not taking advantage of that highway that Jutta is talking about, or not making the most of that highway. And in the next slide, I just, I hope you're taking some notes, or if not, I would say you got the slides anyway. So there's a recent book that has come out of the United Kingdom Open University by a colleague called Martin Weller. And now he talks about the battle for open. And he's saying that the battle for open has begun or has been won. But he has some concerns about why we are still facing some issues. Now, I'll let you explore that and not too much spend time. But what I'm saying by way of exemplification is that there is this conversation going around the world about open education practice, including open educational resources. And the sooner we get a handle on it, not jump on the bandwagon. Now, I'm picking my words very carefully here. I don't want us to jump on the bandwagon. I want us to get a handle. We need to get a handle on what this movement is about and decide how we are going to go through this space ourselves, not because everybody else is jumping on it. So here's the basic question, and again, I'm not assuming that you don't know anything about it. Open educational resources, what are they, as Jutta was saying? Now, here's a definition that gets cited by a lot of people. It's developed by UNESCO, so people cite that. I'm sure you've seen it. So I'll let you read it for a little while. I'll read it with you. Teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, so it doesn't have to be electronic, right, that reside in the public domain that's out there or have been released under an open license. This is the other point. It's not just something that is sitting on the web. It has to have a particular kind of license. And no cost access, adaptation and redistribution. So I think, we need to get a handle on, think about it, what does it really mean? What is an open educational resource? The UNESCO Declaration as well came up with these kinds of recommendations. I hope you can read it. That, organizations like, international organizations like UNESCO and other organizations should promote these kinds of things, facilitate awareness, enable environments, information technology that Jutta is talking about, reinforce the development of strategies, promote understanding what we are doing, foster strategic alliances like organizations like the Commonwealth of Learning and open universities around the world, encourage research on OER, and facilitate finding, retrieving, and sharing of OER. There was a time not long ago when we used to say, well, yeah, it's a great idea, OER is a great idea, but where are they? How can we find them? And in the course of my presentation, in the course of 2 days, we will look at a number of places where we can find OER. But here's the other thing about OER. It must be transportable. It means like it needs to be able to be taken from one place to the other, and reusable, that you develop it once and reuse it. Interoperability is another concept. So these are terms that I think we need to get a handle on, that an OER is no good if it works on one computer or one system and doesn't work on the other. But here is the critical point. And I want to slow down here and have us think about it. A lot of people think that OER is something that is freely available on the web, that I can pick and choose and use whichever way I want. I can in fact change it and put my name on it. That may be true, but the question is why should you want to be able to do that? And I think these points. I went to the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates Foundation. If you just look at that website, Bill Gates has got this quote on the front page. I think you might have seen it. He says, "All lives have equal value. Now, Bill Gates has made a lot of money now to talk a bit like that. I just read in the in one of the news feeds that I still get from Australia that one of the big miners, I forget his name now, in Western Australia, has given the largest amount of money to universities in Western Australia, about $400 million. So people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett in the US and miners, in Australia are giving bucket loads of money away. They've made a lot of money and they've given it away. So Bill Gates can talk like that, but he's not just giving money away. The value principle is that he says all lives have equal value. Now, the reason why we are talking, the reason why we are talking about open educational resources is that we need to understand why we ought to be talking about open educational resources. Why is it important? Why should we even bother? Is it just about using a particular type of resource? I think the belief is that you believe in sharing. The underlying belief is that, you should be wanting to share with people who do not have access to opportunity. See, Matai and I were talking about this concept some time ago, about being in a disadvantaged situation. In a place like the Pacific, in a place like India, in a place like Africa, where we do not currently have access to all the resources that the Europeans and the Americans have. That's a situation of inequality and lack of equity, the ability to access from a position of disadvantage gives us the need, causes us to think about the need to share what we produce. Now, how do you balance that with ownership? And I think I'll come to that point. So I think this what is the value principle underlying the need for us to think about sharing, about open educational resources, and about making resources openly accessible? The value principles continue along these lines. The need to have open access. If you don't have access, then you are going to be disadvantaged. And open access and implication of open source, which means that if I do not know how you have put something together, if I don't have access to the way something has been put together, then I can't actually do anything about it. For example, you might argue that Apple iPhones are a closed shop, that I buy it as it is. There's not much I can do with it because it's a locked environment. It's not an open source environment. Whereas other kinds of technologies are open source technologies that I can actually go and manipulate and add something to it, change something to it. So in principle, one might argue, I'm not buying Apple iPhones because they are not revealing how they put that together. See, so what is your value principle here? So the value principles and the implication of those value principles of open educational resources are these 5 things that's been articulated by David Wiley, one of the proponents of this concept, that I should be able to reuse it. Well, reuse is not a big thing, right? I mean, you can use and reuse a textbook that is not open source. But are you able to revise it? So you pick a textbook, you pick a chapter on differential equations or something like that, and if you see that something doesn't quite sit well with your perceptions of the subject, are you able to modify it without asking the author that I can do it? Can you remix it? Can you put that content with something else? Can you redistribute it? And can you keep it? At no cost, remember? One of the definitions of OER was at no cost, that I should be able to do this at no cost. One would argue that being able to do that is important for us as teachers because there's an ethical or moral and economic reason behind it. If you put big bucks on it, then you are shutting out a group of people from accessing that educational opportunity. You might argue that that's not a place I want to be. I want to be in a place where I should have access to that educational opportunity. The world is divided into developed and developing. is because of that lack of opportunity. The guys in the developing context do not have access to that content or that resource that the folks in the developed world have. So in order for the two to come together, the people in the developing world need to have access to that educational content and material that people in the developed world have. So what are the critical issues here? I'm sure, a bunch of ideas are roaming through your mind and I'm trying to kickstart this conversation. So write some of these things down, because there's going to be an opportunity for you to ask those questions. So what are the critical issues around what I'm talking about, especially in an academic setting? The point one says, how do academics and developers of open educational resources view academic work? Now, we at universities, intellectual property is our currency, right? Right? I'm standing here because there's things that I'm talking about. So what I know is my currency. That's what I sell. The university has hired me because of what I know, not who I look like or who I am. That's true for everybody else. So intellectual property is very important for all of us, and especially for us at universities. And we put our name down to it, right? And we get judged by that, right? If we produce a patent, I bet you might be promoted to a professor very quickly. But Judah would correct me on that one. So traditionally, academic output has been handled by commercial publishers, right? So we produce something, we produce a patent, the commercial publishers, take it away from you, and they put a seal on it, they put copyright on it, and they sell it. You might make some money out of it. Some people argue not much. You get paid a salary, but the publisher would make a lot of money out of it. That's one model, isn't it? And there are concerns about the rewards to academics and developers for developing learning resources and sharing these resources across repositories. And we try to hide it. We try to put a seal on it, put a name on it, and say, yeah, you better not copy it. You can't even make a copy sometimes for teaching in your class. Sometimes your own material you cannot make a copy of. Is that true? Right? You got to be very careful. So this is the way the world was. Now, but there's something wrong about that, isn't it? You might say. I wrote something, and the publishers have taken it away. They're marketing it, and they're making money out of it. They're giving a little bit of money to me, and then the university takes that money because it's over and above my salary. There's something wrong here, right? About the traditional model. So this whole concept about open educational resources is rethinking about that model. Now, what are the other key issues? A key promise of digital learning resources and its availability across repositories is the opportunity for benefiting from sharing and reusing resources that are expensive and time-consuming to produce. So OER and the use of OER gives us that alternative model to say that, all right, you can produce your material, but you don't have to go to the publishers. You can house it in repositories, like the computing facility that Jita was talking about, and sharing it openly and freely, so you don't have to go to a publisher to do that. So that's the alternative model. The conventional model was you take it, you house it, and you keep it under wraps, and you charge money for people to use it, revise it, reuse it. But the alternative model is to put it in an open access environment. But that doesn't mean give ownership away. Now, here's the critical point. Using the alternative model means that there will be a tendency for users to modify and adapt the original version for their use. Now, here's the sticking point. So you wrote something, and Jita wrote something, let's say a book chapter or a book or an article, and placed it in an open repository, like cloud computing software. And it was under an open license. So you said, all right, Sanjay can take it away and modify it. Now, what are the issues around that? Naturally, this would require consent, right? Some sort of consent of the original owner and developer of the learning resource. Once a learning resource is modified, there will be issues around ownership of the revised version and how the original work should be acknowledged. So without appropriate learning resource rights, management conventions, such issues and concerns will hinder progress on the sharing of digital learning resources. So a different kind of licensing would be required. So we have got two kinds of models. One is a model whereby things are controlled and copyrighted and kept under wraps. And the alternative model is that model where resources once produced can be kept in an open environment and shared openly and freely. One could describe that alternative model as OER-based learning. So learning that is taking place using open educational resources. Now, what does that mean? What are the claims? What are some of the things that people are saying? These are the kinds of claims. That the future of learning is inextricably linked to the development of quality learning resources, okay? That digital learning objects are the building blocks of e-learning. Learning object repositories are the libraries of the e-learning era, with the potential to fuel learning as the stock exchanges fuel the industrial area. So we are talking about two different models of educational opportunity or learning and teaching. But is it a binary? Is it one or the other? The new, the open, the good versus the old, closed, and the bad? Is it an oversimplification of two different models and you decide where you want to be? One could argue that not everything can be open or should be open. All right? Fine. Greater participation cannot be achieved by those who are currently excluded due to lack of access. This is the point that I was talking about, that I was having a conversation with Matai. Greater participation cannot be achieved by those who are currently excluded due to lack of access. So if you are excluded from access to educational resources, then how are you going to promote greater participation and talk about education for all? Everybody talks about education for all. The United Nations talks about education for all. The Millennium Development Goals for education. How are you going to have education for all if you don't engage in open educational resources? And here's the beef. Giving away educational resources is not about gifting. It's not about giving it as a gift. It's about sharing educational content with people. So it's meaningless to talk about education for all if you are not going to make resources available to all at no cost. Because if you put a cost on it, then the have-nots will never have the have. All right? So here is an ideological issue that I think I'm talking about. It means redefining ownership. It means who owns what. As I was saying to Bruce the other day, jokingly, at the Mango Tree Corner, that, most of us in the universities are not really going to make a very large impact on our knowledge about most things. There's 1% of the people in the universe who are really going to do something that will make any difference to what we know. Most of us are going to go through the motions and try to do the best we can, and a lot of the things that we produce are not really going to change very much in our lifetimes. I'm sorry to say, so don't get too excited about what we are writing or producing. But it is a question about redefining ownership. So how willing are you to give what you've written to other people to use? Not giving ownership away. That doesn't mean that you are saying you can take mine and put your name on it. No, that's unethical. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about giving ownership away. We're talking about people using what we might have created at no cost. And being able to not just use it, but reuse it, remix it, redistribute it. And if we believe in education for all, if we believe in equity, then we have a responsibility to want to share. You can't be an open university like this and not have it in your DNA to share. You can't say we are a university of the people in every village, in every community, and not share what you've got without a price on it. So what I'm saying, and you see I'm taking my time to say this, either you believe in this or you don't believe in it. It's not about one resource or the other. It's about believing what is your goal. If the Vice Chancellor and other people go around the region and say, we are the university of the people, we are out there in every village and every community, well then, we should be the first people to say where money, where mouth is, and say everything that the university produces is freely and openly available. Not giving ownership away. You put your name on it, you put your name on it. Damn right you put your name on it. But you make it available openly and freely. Every course material that is produced by this university should be openly and freely available. Why would you want to keep it under wraps? What are you protecting? Well, okay, I'm injecting a little bit of bias here, right? Okay, so ignore my enthusiasm. But it means redefining ownership. And there are ways of redefining ownership. One of the most common ones, as you have seen in Sanjay's course, if you've done it, is Creative Commons licenses. What is Creative Commons license? The organization has released, you can Google Creative Commons and you see how it started. You might not be too impressed by how it got started, but fundamentally these licenses allow creators to communicate which rights they reserve. Now, here is another misconception. Open educational resources doesn't mean that you just write something and give it away to people, do whatever you want with it. No. It's a different kind of license. It's a different kind of license that has got various levels in it, and I'm going to take some time to go through it. But these licenses allow creators to communicate which rights they reserve and which rights they waive. So if you feel very strongly that there's some things that I want to protect, that I don't want people to change, well, fine. But whereas traditionally, in the traditional closed environment that I was talking about, you give no rights away whatsoever. Here's what the Creative Commons licenses are talking about. There's actually different categories. There are four main categories. One, traditionally, you see books that got C, right? C with a circle. You've seen that? That means you can't do anything with it. It's copyrighted by Elsevier or Taylor and Francis or USB or whatever, and written by Bruce Yates, right? That's the way it might have been done. But the open educational resources could have any one of this. It could have an attribution by, which requires attribution to the original author. So that if Sanjay wrote something and it's got a license with BY, means that I need to attribute that resource to that person. I'm not taking that ownership away. Get that very clear. We are not giving ownership away. Share alike means like I'm sharing it, you share it the same way. So you enter into a legal binding that if I shared it the way I did, you share it the way you did. Non-commercial means like, okay, I'm giving you permission to share it, but you can't make money out of it. All right? And non-derivatives are only the original, but you can't change it. Like it says, if I put ND on it, that means you can't change it, correct? All right, correct me if I'm wrong, Sanjay. Under those four categories, you have these 6 licenses. So instead of a singular C, you see what Jito was saying earlier on? That what he thinks is open educational resources is something open out there. But this is the perception of a lot of us about open educational resources. A lot of us haven't thought through that it's a lot more than that. That Creative Commons licenses comes, these open licenses that we're talking about, these alternative models we're talking about, comes in 2 categories. So I could have a CC BY license, right? So instead of a C, there'll be a CC BY, right? Means like, okay, you can share it, but you attribute it to me, that I was the original owner of that, original creator of that. And then the share alike, when CC BY means like the way I shared it, you share it the same way. So you're bound by that. Non-derivatives, you can use it, you can share it, but you can't change it. So that means it's a bit more control. Non-commercial, you can't make money out of it. Non-commercial share alike. So the one that I think looks more like the traditional copyright ownership is the CC BY and CND, which is the same. So open educational resources has a variety of categories in the licensing framework, as opposed to the traditional model of no ability to do anything or change with it at all. So again, let's look at that in a bit more detail if it went over our heads, CCBY, this license lets others distribute, remix, tweak, and build upon your work, even for commercial purposes, as long as they credit you for the original creation. So that's the most open license that you could give to your work. Here's the next one, Attribution Sharealike, CCBY Sharealike. This license lets others remix, tweak, and build upon your work, even for commercial purposes, as long as they credit you and license their new creations under identical terms. In attribution, no derivatives, CCBY-ND, this license allows for redistribution, commercial and non-commercial, as long as it is passed along unchanged and in whole credit to you. So that's the most controlled one. So the difference between a traditional copyrighted material and an openly licensed material is that the openly licensed material has levels of openness in it. It doesn't mean you are giving everything away. No, nobody's saying that. You see, this is the misconception. Nobody's saying you can use anything that I do willy-nilly. You can choose what kind of use you want to put your material to. And that is the advantage of open licensing. Non-commercial, as I was saying, lets others remix, tweak, and build upon your work non-commercially. And although the new works must also acknowledge you and be non-commercial, they don't have to license their derivative works on the same terms. And the fifth one, attribution non-commercial, share like CCBY and CSA. This license lets others remix, tweak, and build upon your work non-commercially as long as they credit you and license their new creations under identical terms. And then finally, the most closed one, this license is the most restrictive of the 6 main licenses, only allowing others to download your works and share them with others as long as they credit you, but they can't change them in any way or use them commercially. Now, so fundamentally, what I wanted to talk about is to put some concepts out there to make clear what we are talking about. Again, I'm not saying that I've said it all. A lot of these concepts that I've said will reoccur over the next few days. So as we sit down and we develop policies about how this university needs to think about open educational resources, these kinds of issues will have to come to the fore. We will have to sit down and think about what is the value principle? What are we trying to achieve? How does that sit with the thinking of this university, as an open university, as a university in the developing world? So it's not as simple as about using one resource or the other, is it? One might argue, hey guys, I hope you walk away at the end of the day tomorrow to say, you know what? I don't think we have a choice. I think this is the way we have to go, because I'm convinced this is the way to go. Because this is University of the South Pacific. This is a university in a developing country. This is a university in a region that is threatened, in a region that is disadvantaged, in a region that has been undermined through lack of opportunity and equality for a very long time. Continues to be so. So if I was sitting and writing the strategic plan of this university and saying, what is my value principle? What is the value principle of this university? What am I trying to achieve? And this is the thought that I want to leave you with, to say to you, you guys, we guys, will be developing something that will go to committees like the Academic Programs Committee, the Quality Committee, and the Senate. So what is the message you are going to promote about this university? It's not just developing a policy about OER, because I think we have an opportunity here to really ask the hard questions about why should we be thinking about OER? Why is it absolutely crucial? Now, if one of you or many of you say to me, no, Som, this is all wrong, that's not the way it's going to be because of X, Y, and Z, and I want to hear that argument. Because what is the argument that I am going to take, that you are going to take to Senate and other committees, and the Vice Chancellor eventually, because it will get nowhere if the Vice Chancellor doesn't approve it. You know that. You know how universities work, and this university works. I'll leave you with one slide. And interestingly, this slide just came to me yesterday. It just boggles my mind how much is out there, how much. I mean, this whole idea of open educational resources goes back, maybe 5, 6 years? 10 years. 10 years at the most, right? But at 5, 6 years ago, even 10 years ago, a lot of us didn't even understand what we were talking about. Or whether, hey, I mean, it's a great idea, open educational resources, but where are they? Can I find the good ones for the course that I've got to teach? Where are they? Can you show me some? And 10 years ago, I would have been saying, oh, I really don't know. And how do you know that what's out there is good, is useful, is that you are going to be able to give to your students, recommend to your students? And are the students the best judge of what is out there that is good or not good? We often tell students to say, go and search for open educational resources. If we don't understand it, how do we expect our students to understand it? So my argument is that don't ask the students to go looking for this, because you got to get a handle on this. You decide. It's like the example that I was saying. Don't send the patient to the pharmacist and go say, you got a headache, go figure something out. Go and ask the pharmacist, or go and talk to the girl or the guy at the pharmacy, and they will tell you what you want. Because the patient doesn't know. That's why they come to the doctor. The teacher is in the same situation. You are supposed to know which content is good or not good. You're supposed to tell the student that this is the content that you should be looking at. That's not the content you should be looking at. One of those things is 1.2 billion licensing frameworks, So you can see how the world has changed since the idea came about. Percentage of Creative Commons works shared under free culture licenses. You might think that, are we the only ones talking about this? This will put into context that, no, there's other people in the world thinking about this. And this was very interesting. 37% used that CC-BY license. Huh? CC-BY-SA, that's right, yeah. Right? 2%, 6%, non-commercial, non-derivatives. Right? The New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art released 375,000 digital works in the public domain. Around the world, in Africa, Indonesia, other places. I mean, okay, this is a selection. Pakistan, South America, where resources, I'm not going to I'll click on those links. You can have a look at it. But in Africa, for example, these kinds of storybooks, that are being developed and made available openly and freely for schools. Indonesia is another story. I would, have a look at it. The point that I'm trying to make here as a final comment on what I'm trying to say is that this is the conversation we need to be part of. That's all I'm saying. You can't shut yourself and say, I'm going to do what I was doing. The university can continue to do what it was doing. I don't care about this environment. I think we don't have a choice anymore. And I'm at the same time, I'm the biggest skeptic that there is. I'm going to ask the hard questions, you know. Sanjay knows me that, you know. And I'm not a great believer in everybody jumping on the bandwagon. I've been around this business too long to understand where we came from and where we're going. And I see a lot of things being churned over and over again. But what I'm saying, and this is my final position, is that this is a conversation we need to have, seriously, and especially at this university, given our disadvantage in comparison to Australia, the US, and North America and Europe in terms of access and opportunity. So we don't have a choice for being out of it. We need to be in it to have a conversation. We don't know where this movement might go. And we can't be sitting on from the sidelines. We have to be in it to go with it, but we'll make our own decisions on what is right and wrong for us. So I'm going to leave it there, because all I wanted to do is to provide a context for us to have this conversation. Now, I have 15 more minutes left, so can I just use it to open up the conversation a little bit to see where you are? I think I've said enough about where I am. It might get me into trouble, but I said what I wanted to say.